The Grand Court of Velara was a place built to impress and intimidate. The ceiling soared higher than the tallest trees, painted with images of ancient battles and victories. Tall windows let streams of golden sunlight fall upon the polished marble floor, where nobles in their finest robes gathered like peacocks in a garden. Jewels glittered, silks rustled, and the air smelled of perfume mixed with ambition. It was a hall of pride, of politics, and of power. At the center of it all stood Princess Illyra, daughter of the High King. She was young, yet her presence commanded the room. Draped in white and silver, her crown light upon her brow, she spoke words meant to calm old enemies and bring new peace. Her voice was soft, but it carried each syllable reaching every corner of the chamber. "My people," she said, "we must end the bloodshed. The time has come not for swords, but for hands joined together. We will not thrive by sharpening blades against our brothers and sisters. We will thrive by walking forward together." Many listened with polite faces, but behind those masks were sneers, doubts, and anger. The nobles of Velara were not united. Some saw Illyra as a dreamer, too gentle for a world that had been hardened by centuries of war. Some feared peace would weaken their grip on wealth and land. And some, though they smiled, carried shadows in their hearts, shadows that longed for her downfall. As she continued, a hush fell over the hall. Not because her words had swayed them, but because something was wrong. Her voice faltered. She pressed a hand to her chest, her fingers trembling. Her lips turned pale, her breath shallow. A murmur spread like fire. "What is happening?" one whispered. "Is she unwell?" asked another. Then, before the eyes of her court, the princess staggered. The goblet of wine slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. She tried to steady herself, reaching for the marble pillar beside her, but her knees gave way. She collapsed upon the cold stone, her gown pooling around her like spilled light. Gasps filled the chamber. The silence that followed was heavier than thunder. No one moved at first. The royal physicians looked to the king's ministers, waiting for orders. The ministers looked to one another, too shocked to speak. The guards at the doors froze, uncertain, and then a single voice broke through the stillness. "Poison!" someone shouted. The word struck the court like a blade. Cries erupted. Nobles stepped back as if death itself might leap from her body. Mothers clutched their children. Old men cursed. Advisors shouted for the guards to seal the doors. In the chaos, none dared step closer to her. None dared risk the unseen hand of whoever had struck this cruel blow. But there was one who did not hesitate. From the edge of the hall, where he had stood in silence like a shadow, a tall figure moved. He wore no silk or jewels, only armor of dull iron gray. His face was plain compared to the fine features of the court, his hair cropped short, his skin marked with scars of battles fought far from this palace. He was not of their world, not of their blood. He was a human. His name was Marcus Hale, once a soldier of Earth, now called Warborn by the people of Velara. Many looked at him with suspicion, some with disdain. To them, humans were strange creatures, fierce, stubborn, and unrefined. Marcus was tolerated only because he had sworn his life to protect the princess, and because she, against all counsel, trusted him. Now, while nobles drew back in fear, Marcus pushed forward. He crossed the floor in long strides, his boots echoing against marble. When others recoiled from the fallen princess, he knelt beside her without pause. "Illyra," he whispered, his voice low but steady. He slid an arm beneath her shoulders, lifting her gently. Her skin was clammy, her breathing shallow. He pressed 2 fingers to her neck, searching for the beat of her heart. It was there, but weak, fluttering like a bird trapped in a cage. Her lips moved faintly. No sound came, only a ghost of breath. Her eyes, wide and shining with fear, searched his face as though clinging to it. "Stay with me," Marcus said, his tone carrying the command of a soldier and the plea of a friend. "Don't give in." Around them voices rose. "Keep back the human," one noble shouted. "What does he think he is doing?" sneered another. "This is a matter for physicians, not for him," But Marcus ignored them. He had seen death before, on battlefields where comrades had fallen in his arms. He recognized its shadow now, coiling around the princess, waiting to pull her away. He would not let it. Not while he still breathed. He glanced at the shattered goblet where a dark stain spread across the floor. He caught a bitter scent rising from the wine. His eyes narrowed. Something was wrong with that drink. The princess's head grew heavy against his arm, her eyelids fluttering. The court continued to argue, their words sharp and empty. Yet in that vast hall of power, pride and fear, only Marcus Hale moved with purpose. The princess had collapsed before her court. But the Warborn human had already begun to uncover the truth. The hall of Velara had turned into a nest of panic. Nobles shouted over one another, voices cracking with fear and anger. Some demanded the doors be locked. Others cried for the royal physicians. Ministers argued whether to hide the incident from the people or declare it as an act of war. Yet in all the noise, no one stepped forward to touch the princess. They stood back as though death itself had made her untouchable. Only Marcus remained at her side. The human lifted Alira carefully, holding her close to his chest. She was so light in his arms, far too fragile for the one who had spoken with such strength only moments ago. Her breath brushed weakly against his armor. Her eyelids trembled. The nobles saw it and muttered among themselves. Their disdain for Marcus was no secret. To them, humans were outsiders, short-lived, brash, rough of tongue and hand. The name Warborn had been given as both respect and insult. It marked humans as those shaped by endless conflict, creatures of survival more than of refinement. The court of Velara valued elegance, calm, and bloodline. Marcus had none of these things, and yet it was Marcus who knelt while they all watched. "Move back," he barked at the nearest physician. "Give her air!" The man blinked, stunned, unused to being ordered by a human. Still he obeyed, retreating a step. Marcus tilted Alira's head gently, checking her breath. It was shallow, interrupted by faint spasms. Her lips quivered as if she wanted to speak but could not. He pressed his ear near her mouth, straining to catch even a whisper. Darkness. The word escaped faintly, little more than a sigh. Marcus tightened his jaw. He had seen too many comrades speak their last words like that, carried away before help could come. His heart hammered against his chest, but his mind remained cold, sharp, steady. "She's been poisoned," he growled. His voice cut through the chaos of the chamber like a blade. The court gasped again. Some turned pale, others furious. How dare a human speak such claims? A minister barked. He has no right to declare such things. But Marcus ignored them. His gaze had already found the evidence. The shattered goblet lay in a pool of wine near Elira's feet. He reached for it with one hand, his movements calm but precise. Nobles recoiled as though he touched something cursed. He lifted the fragment, studied it, and brought it near his nose. A bitter stench, sharp, metallic, unnatural. His eyes hardened. Poison, without doubt. Memories from another life flashed before him. The jungles of Earth's forgotten wars, soldiers dropping in agony after drinking from canteens tainted by enemies, men who had coughed blood because their rations had been laced with toxins. Marcus had survived those days not because he was stronger, but because he had learned to recognize death's tricks. Now that same knowledge surged back to him. He turned toward the throne where the king sat frozen, his face ashen. "Your Majesty," Marcus said firmly, "this was no accident. The princess has been poisoned. If we do not act now, she will not see another sunrise." The words struck the court into silence. All eyes turned to the king. He was torn, his heart in his daughter's hands, yet bound by pride, unable to admit a human's judgment before his court. But Alira stirred faintly in Marcus's arms. Her body shook, her lips trembled again. He leaned close, hearing the faintest sound. A help. That was enough for Marcus. He rose to his feet, lifting her higher. His armor groaned under the movement, but he held her as though she weighed nothing. "Clear the way," he thundered. His voice was no longer a soldier's request, but a commander's order. For a heartbeat, the court hesitated, And then, perhaps out of fear, perhaps out of shame, the nobles parted. Marcus carried the princess down the long hall, her crown tilting against his chest, her breath fading against his armor. Behind him, whispers rippled like wind in tall grass. Why does the king allow this? A human carrying the air, unthinkable. Yet none else moved. He did not care. Their words were like the buzzing of flies. He had faced worse on battlefields soaked in blood. What mattered now was the faint beat of Alira's heart, and the shadow of death pressing closer with each step. As he strode through the towering doors, one truth rang louder in his mind than all their sneers. If the princess lived, it would not be because of her court. It would be because a human, the outcast Warborn, refused to let her die. The corridors of the palace echoed with Marcus's footsteps as he carried Princess Alira in his arms. The heavy doors of the court slammed shut behind him, sealing the nobles inside their storm of panic. Outside, the air was quieter, but the silence felt sharp like a knife pressed against the skin. The human's jaw was tight, his eyes burning with focus. He had one thought only: keep her alive. Alira stirred weakly, her fingers twitching against his armor. Marcus looked down at her pale face. The silver crown upon her head seemed far too heavy now, her lips colorless as frost. Her breath came shallow, every exhale slower than the last. "Hold on, princess," Marcus muttered, voice rough with urgency. "I've seen worse. You're not leaving me now." He pushed through the palace halls, heading for the apothecary wing. Servants froze as he passed, their eyes wide at the sight of a human carrying the heir to the throne. Some whispered in fear, some in disgust. None offered help. In one chamber, Marcus set her gently upon a low couch, propping her head with a cushion. His heart pounded as he examined her again. Her veins were faintly blue beneath her skin, a mark of poison spreading fast. He needed to act quickly, but first he had to know what he was facing. His gaze returned to the goblet he still carried, the shards smeared with red wine. He sniffed it again, carefully. That bitter scent, sharp, earthy, laced with something metallic. Recognition struck him like lightning. Hemlock of the deep woods. A rare plant, known across star systems for its cruel effect. Not an instant killer. It worked slowly, tightening its grip until lungs grew too weak to draw breath. It was favored by assassins who wanted their targets to fall quietly, leaving confusion and doubt rather than a quick death. Marcus had seen it once long ago, used on a rebel leader during Earth's conflicts. He had watched the man choke over hours, helpless even as medics tried everything. Only knowledge of countermixtures had saved a handful. He clenched his teeth. Someone planned this. Someone wanted her gone without question. The princess groaned softly, her voice faint. Marcus bent low, listening. "Not accident," she whispered, her words broken, fragile. "They knew." "Counsel." Her eyes fluttered shut again, her strength fading. Marcus's blood turned to fire. Not an accident. Not a mistake. This was treachery born within the court itself. His instincts sharpened, he was no stranger to betrayal. Wars had taught him that enemies were not always outside the walls. Sometimes they sat beside you at the same table, smiling as they sharpened their knives. He rose quickly, moving through the apothecary shelves, hands scanning jars and vials, herbs, roots, powders. His soldier's training came alive again. He remembered nights in jungle camps where soldiers mixed crude remedies to survive poisons. He remembered how activated charcoal drew out toxins, how salt water forced the body to purge, how vinegar neutralized certain venoms. The palace's physicians had never seen war in the mud and blood. But Marcus had. Behind him, footsteps approached. Two shadows filled the doorway. Marcus turned sharply, his hand instinctively going to the knife at his belt. It was not a physician, not a servant. Two advisors cloaked in velvet robes, their faces pale with nervousness. Their eyes flickered not to the princess but to Marcus, and then to the goblet shard lying on the table. "You should step away, human," one said smoothly, though his voice trembled at the edges. "The physicians will tend to her." This is no place for you. Marcus's gaze hardened. He saw the sweat on their brows, the quickness of their eyes. Men hiding something. Men afraid she might wake and speak the truth. You poisoned her, Marcus said flatly. His words were not shouted. They were sharp, low, heavy with certainty. The advisors stiffened. One sneered, though fear flickered in his eyes. Careful, Warborn. Your tongue is dangerous. She's already spoken, Marcus said, standing between them and the princess. His stance was steady, unshaken. She named the council. The second advisor's hand drifted toward his robe. A flash of steel caught Marcus's eye. A blade, small but deadly, hidden for desperate measures. His muscles tensed. His heart pounded, but his mind was calm. He had fought in trenches where death struck faster than thought. He knew the signs of men ready to silence witnesses. The first advisor's voice dropped to a whisper, venomous. The princess must not wake. For a moment, time froze. The room was silent except for Elira's weak breaths. Then, in a surge of violence, the two lunged forward. Marcus stepped into their path, ready to meet them. His hand tightened around his knife, his body angled like a wall of iron. He had saved comrades from worse. He had survived poisons, traps, and ambushes. He was Warborn, and he would not let them take her life. Steel flashed in the chamber as the two advisors lunged, their robes sweeping like shadows. Marcus moved faster. He had no shield, no polished sword like the palace guards, only his soldier's instincts and the short combat knife at his belt. He twisted, caught the wrist of the first attacker and slammed his arm against the wall with a crack. The blade clattered to the floor. The second came low, aiming for Marcus's side. Marcus shifted his weight, driving a knee into the man's chest. The advisor staggered back, gasping, his velvet robes torn. For all their fine clothes, they had no warrior skill. Their strikes were desperate, born of fear. You shouldn't have come here, Marcus growled. His voice was steady, but his eyes were fire. He planted himself like a wall between them and the princess, who still lay pale and trembling on the couch. One advisor hissed, clutching his broken wrist. You know too much, human. Marcus tightened his grip on the knife. Enough to save her. Enough to bury you if I must. The men faltered. They had expected an outcast soldier to cower before noble rank. They had expected him to obey, to bow. Instead, they found themselves staring into the eyes of a man who had walked through fire, who had seen friends die, who had carried the weight of war across worlds. They retreated, muttering promises of vengeance, but Marcus knew they would not give up. They would return or send others. He turned back to Elira. Her breathing was weaker now, her body limp. Time was running out. Marcus dropped the knife on the table and began tearing through the apothecary shelves. Glass vials rattled, powders spilled across the floor. His hands shook, not from fear but from urgency. His mind raced through memories, those brutal campaigns on Earth where survival depended on improvisation. Soldiers had no fine doctors, no magical cures. They had grit and knowledge stolen from experience. He found charcoal, rough black chunks stored in a jar. He crushed them into dust with the heel of his hand. He mixed it with water from a copper basin, creating a dark, foul slurry. Activated charcoal, he remembered, pulled poison like a sponge. It was crude, uncertain, but it had saved lives before. Come on, princess, he whispered, lifting her head gently. Drink this, fight. Her lips barely parted. She was half-conscious, the poison dragging her into shadows. Marcus steadied her jaw and poured the mixture slowly. She gagged, coughed, black liquid spilling down her chin. For a moment he feared it was too late. But then she swallowed a little, weak but real. That's it, he urged, his voice soft now, almost pleading. Good, take it in. Don't let it win. He mixed salt into water, pressing it to her lips. She coughed again, her body convulsing, and suddenly a thin stream of dark fluid spilled from her mouth onto the floor. The smell was sharp, bitter. Marcus's chest tightened with relief. The body was fighting back. He stayed close, wiping her lips with a cloth, speaking to her as though his words alone could keep her anchored. You're stronger than them, Elira. Stronger than their poison. You're not leaving now, not while I'm here. Minutes stretched like hours. Her breathing hitched, her body trembling with each wave of sickness. Marcus did not move away. He held her, steadied her, poured small amounts of clean water when she could take it. He did not care for the mess, the spilled charcoal, the stains on his armor. All that mattered was the faint color returning to her cheeks, the flicker of life resisting death's grip. At last, her eyes fluttered open again. This time they lingered. She looked at him through the haze of pain, her lips trembling. Marcus. Her voice was weak, but it was there. His throat tightened, but he forced a steady smile. I've got you. You're safe now. Just rest. Her hand twitched, reaching toward his. He caught it gently, feeling the faint warmth in her fingers. That fragile spark of life was enough to steel his heart. But as he held her, his mind hardened with resolve. This had not been chance. The poison had been chosen carefully, hidden in her goblet, meant to strike in silence. And her faint whisper still echoed in his ears. They knew. Counsel. She had been betrayed from within. Marcus rose slowly, his eyes cold as steel. He looked at the shattered goblet, at the spilled poison, at the shadows still clinging to the room. He had saved her life for now, but the war for her throne, her kingdom, and perhaps her soul had only just begun, and he, the outcast human, would stand at the center of it. The chamber was heavy with silence after the struggle. The shattered goblet lay forgotten on the table. Black stains of charcoal marked the floor, and the faint smell of poison still hung in the air. Marcus knelt again beside Princess Elira, who now breathed a little steadier. Her face was pale, but the trembling in her hands had slowed. Each rise and fall of her chest was a fragile miracle, and Marcus watched it as though it were the heartbeat of the world itself. He should have felt relief. But instead his chest burned with a colder fire. Anger. Anger at the cowards who had dared to strike her. Anger at the court that had stood frozen, and anger at the traitors who had crept away after failing to finish what they began. Her lips moved faintly again. Marcus bent closer, his ear near her mouth. Counsel, she whispered. They want throne? The words broke off into a weak cough, but Marcus understood enough. His stomach tightened. This was not the act of a lone assassin. This was a plan woven into the heart of the kingdom itself. The very advisors sworn to guide her had poisoned her. He brushed a hand across her forehead, his rough fingers strangely gentle. Rest now, he murmured. I will deal with them. As though answering, her eyes closed, her body sinking into exhausted sleep. Marcus rose to his full height, his armor marked with dust, blood, and charcoal stains. He looked like no courtly knight, no noble guard. He looked like what he truly was, a soldier carved by survival, unpolished but unyielding. The door creaked behind him. Instantly Marcus's hand went to the knife at his belt. But it was only a servant, a young boy carrying a tray of bandages. His eyes widened at the sight of Marcus standing guard like a statue of iron. Tell no one she still breathes, Marcus ordered. His voice firm but quiet. Say she is under care, nothing more. Do you understand? The boy nodded quickly, fear in his eyes. Yes, Warborn. When he was gone, Marcus turned his gaze to the window. Beyond the palace walls lay the city, its towers rising high, its people living in peace, never knowing their princess had nearly been stolen from them. He wondered how many smiled in ignorance, how many whispered in secret halls plotting her death. The door opened again, this time heavier, slower. Two figures entered, the same advisors he had driven off earlier. Their robes were straightened, their faces calm, but their eyes gave them away. They had not come as healers. They had come as executioners. Marcus moved instantly, stepping between them and Elira. His knife glinted in the dim light. You will not touch her, he said. The first advisor's smile was thin, poisonous. You overstep, human. This is the business of Velara's council. You are nothing more than a guard. Then why do you carry blades to a sick room? Marcus shot back. His voice was iron. Why do your eyes shake when I speak the word poison? The second advisor sneered. Because the princess is weak. She would have dragged this kingdom into ruin with her talk of peace. We act for the strength of the realm. By murdering your future queen? Marcus's tone dripped with contempt. I've seen warlords like you before. Always talking of strength. Always hiding behind daggers in the dark. They stiffened at his words but did not back away. One hand slipped again toward a hidden blade. Stand aside, Warborn. The first hissed. She should not wake. For a heartbeat the chamber seemed frozen. The sleeping princess, the trembling candlelight, the silence of betrayal pressing against the walls. Marcus took a step forward, his presence filling the room. If she dies, he said slowly, it will be over my body. And I promise you mine won't fall easily. The advisors exchanged a glance. One sneered, the other swallowed nervously. You will regret this, one spat. No, Marcus replied, his voice steady as stone. You will. They turned sharply, retreating, their robes swirling like shadows. The door closed behind them, but their words lingered in the air. Marcus stood still, his knife at his side, his ears tuned to every sound. He knew they would not stop. The poison had failed, the blades had failed, but traitors never surrendered easily. They would try again, perhaps with more men, perhaps with the court itself. He looked back at Elira sleeping peacefully at last, her chest rising with fragile breaths. They fear you because you bring hope, he whispered, and hope is stronger than their knives. He sat beside her, his back to the wall, his knife resting across his knees. He did not close his eyes. He had kept men alive through nights darker than this. He would keep her alive too, and when dawn came he swore the truth would no longer hide in shadows. The council thought the princess weak. They thought the human was nothing, but they had awakened the wrath of the Warborn. The night was long, and Marcus did not move from his place beside Princess Elira. The candles burned low, their flames shivering in the quiet air. Outside the palace slept, but Marcus knew the shadows were not empty. Betrayal never rested. He had learned this in war. Enemies struck when the body was weakest, when eyes closed in exhaustion. That was when the knife came. That was when trust turned into death, so he stayed awake, his back pressed against the cold wall, his hand wrapped around his knife, his eyes always moving from door to window to the princess's face. Her breathing was steadier now, but still weak, still fragile. He listened to every breath as if it were a drum guiding his heartbeat. It was near dawn when he heard it. Footsteps, soft and deliberate, outside the chamber door. Too soft for servants, too quiet for honest men. Marcus rose silently, shifting his weight like a hunter before the strike. The door creaked. Shadows slipped inside. 3 figures this time, armed with short blades and wrapped in dark cloaks. Their eyes glittered with purpose. They thought the room would hold only a helpless princess and a weary human. They were wrong. Marcus stepped forward, blocking their view of the bed. His knife glinted faintly in the candlelight. His voice was low, calm, and dangerous. You chose the wrong night. The intruders hesitated, startled that he was awake, but then their jaws tightened. One raised his blade. Stand aside, Warborn. This is bigger than you. Marcus's lip curled. Nothing is bigger than my oath. They rushed him all at once, hoping to overwhelm him with speed. But Marcus was not a court guard trained for show. He was a soldier born of blood and fire. He had fought in trenches filled with smoke, in alleys where death came from every shadow, in jungles where men screamed and vanished. Compared to those, 3 traitors in velvet were nothing. He caught the first man's arm mid-swing and twisted sharply. The blade dropped, the man cried out, and Marcus drove his elbow into the attacker's jaw. The man crumpled to the floor, unconscious before he hit the ground. The second came from the side, slashing low. Marcus pivoted, letting the blade skim against his armor, and struck back with brutal efficiency. His fist, hard as iron, slammed into the man's ribs. A crack echoed. The intruder fell, gasping, unable to rise. The third froze for a moment, eyes wide. Marcus's gaze locked on him, cold and unyielding. In that instant, the man saw not just a human. He saw a predator, A survivor who had stared into death too many times to fear it now. Desperation overcame hesitation, and the man lunged anyway. Marcus sidestepped and drove his knife into the table beside him, pinning the man's sleeve to the wood. With a swift motion, he grabbed the attacker's throat, pushing him back against the wall. "Who sent you?" Marcus growled. His grip tightened. "Speak." The man choked, struggling against the hand that held him like steel. His eyes darted toward the bed, toward the princess, and Marcus's rage boiled. "You tried to kill her once with poison," Marcus snarled. "Now you come with blades. You think she is weak. You think I am weak." He slammed the man harder against the wall. "But I am Warborn, and I will break you before I let her die." The man's lips trembled, but no confession came. Marcus's eyes narrowed. He shoved the intruder to the ground, knocking him unconscious with a final blow. Silence returned to the chamber, broken only by the princess's soft breathing. 3 traitors lay defeated at Marcus's feet. He stood tall, chest rising and falling, the taste of battle sharp on his tongue. His body bore scars of old wars, his armor dented, his hands rough, but his spirit burned bright. He looked back at Elira. She had not stirred during the fight. Perhaps that was mercy. She should not have to see the ugliness of treachery revealed in blood and broken bones. Marcus wiped the sweat from his brow, sheathed his knife, and stood guard once more. He had won this night, but he knew the war was not finished. If 3 could be sent, more would follow. If the advisors feared discovery, they would strike harder, faster, until either Elira or Marcus fell. But Marcus's resolve was carved deeper than steel. He would not falter. He had faced armies, he had faced hunger and despair, he had faced death itself, and every time he had risen, now he rose for her. The nobles called him lesser. The court called him outcast. But in this hour, when loyalty was measured not in words but in blood, Marcus Hale showed the truth. He was more than their titles, more than their crowns, more than their poisoned wine and hidden knives. He was human. He was Warborn, and his wrath would guard the princess until the last breath left his body. Morning came at last. The first rays of sunlight broke through the tall palace windows, spilling across the marble halls of Velara. The night had been long and cruel, but the dawn carried with it a fragile hope. Servants whispered in corners. Guards shifted nervously at their posts. No one knew whether the princess had survived the poison, and rumors twisted like smoke through every corridor. Some said she had died. Others claimed she still fought for breath. Few dared to speak the truth aloud, that the council's hands were stained. When the great doors of the throne room opened, silence fell. Princess Elira entered, weak but alive, her steps slow yet steady. Her gown was plain, not jeweled as before, and her crown rested lightly on her brow. She leaned upon a strong arm for support, and at her side walked Marcus Hale, the war-born human, his armor scratched, his face lined with exhaustion, but his presence unshaken. The court gasped. Nobles bowed their heads, some in relief, some in shame, some in fear. The king himself rose from his throne, tears glistening in his tired eyes. "Elira," he whispered, his voice breaking, but it was Elira who raised her hand for silence. "My lords," she said, her voice soft yet clear. "You saw me fall before you. You saw me collapse, poisoned before your very eyes. You cried out in fear. You shouted for guards and physicians. But tell me—" She paused, her gaze sweeping over them like a blade. "Which of you came to my side?" Her words cut the hall deeper than any weapon. No noble spoke. They shifted uncomfortably, eyes falling to the floor, unable to meet her gaze. "It was not you," Elira continued, her tone sharper now. "It was not the ministers, not the advisors, not even the healers frozen in doubt. It was him." She turned, her hand resting upon Marcus's arm. The court followed her eyes. The human stood tall, silent, his scarred face unreadable. This man you call outsider, this man you call lesser, this Warborn whom you whispered against in your halls, he carried me when I fell. He fought when you all froze. He gave me life when poison sought to take it. Her voice trembled, not with weakness but with power, and he faced those who conspired against me when all of you feared to act. The nobles murmured, fear and shame clashing in their voices. Some looked at Marcus with new respect, others with old hatred made stronger by humiliation, but none could deny the truth. Elira straightened, her strength returning with every word. The council betrayed me. They feared peace. They feared change, so they struck at me in shadows, thinking me weak. But I stand before you now, alive, stronger, unbroken, and I will not forget who saved me, nor who stood aside. Her words rang through the throne room, heavy as iron. Marcus said nothing. He only remained at her side, his hand near his weapon, his eyes sweeping the chamber. He did not care for their stares, their whispers. He had seen worse in the eyes of dying soldiers. He had felt the weight of comrades trusting him with their last breaths. To him, this was only another battlefield. But when Elira looked at him, her eyes shining with gratitude, he felt something stir in his chest. Something warmer than duty, deeper than survival. It was not the bond of soldier to commander. It was something more human, trust, respect, and a silent promise that neither poison nor blade could break. The king stepped forward, his voice low and heavy with emotion. Marcus Hale, Warborn of Earth, you have done what no other dared. You have saved not only my daughter, but the future of this kingdom. For that I owe you more than words. Marcus bowed his head slightly. I did what I swore, sire. Nothing more. But Elira shook her head gently. No, Marcus. You did far more. You showed them what humanity truly means. Her words echoed in the silent hall. Humanity. A word the nobles had used with scorn, with dismissal, yet now it rang like a banner of victory. Humanity was not weakness. Humanity was not lesser. Humanity was will. Humanity was defiance. Humanity was the strength to fight against death itself and win. The court of Valara would never forget the sight of their princess standing alive beside the scarred human who had saved her. They would whisper his name, some with fear, some with awe, and Marcus Hale, Warborn of Earth, would remain at her side, not for glory, not for power, but because he had made a promise. No harm would come to her while he still drew breath, and that truth, carved into the marble of history, was more unshakable than any crown.